Welcome to EPG Pathshala. We are going to discuss about continuing education for neo-literates. I am Dr. Rohini Sudhakar from Department of Continuing and Adult Education and Extension Work of SNDT Women's University, Mumbai. So, we will discuss this module on continuing education for neo-literates by telling you one story which had happened in one adult education center. I will tell you the story of Surekha. Surekha was a 9th standard pass married woman. She joined the adult education center of her village because the local prarak of adult education center persuaded her to learn something new. Initially, Surekha was reluctant to join, but after seeing the work of the adult education center in her village, she was convinced that she would really get to learn something which will enhance her income. Soon, an adult education center's educational tour was organized by the prarak, in which all the learners of adult education center were taken to visit a food processing unit near their village. Most of the women were interested in learning how to prepare jam, pickles and chutneys of various fruits such as mango, orange, lychee and pineapple, etc. Hence, on the request of the learners, a short course of food processing and preservation was organized by Adult Education Center, wherein Surekha learned how to make tomato sauce and ginger candy. She told her husband about her new experience. Her husband told her, "Good idea. We are producing plenty of tomatoes and many of them go west. Now that you have learned to make tomato sauce, we can start a new enterprise." She discussed this idea with the prarak and other female learners at the adult education center. Soon, Surekha gained confidence to start a production unit of tomato sauce making. The resource person of sauce making at Adult Education Center explained her how quality should not be compromised. The demand for the product increased. Her business was thriving, and in no time Surekha needed help, and with the help of the prarak, interested women gathered together and decided to join her enterprise. Surekha made all the women partners of her enterprise. Now, other women came to visit Surekha's unit to get some ideas. She thanks the continuing education program of Adult Education Center for giving her the guidance and confidence. Today, most of the countries of the world are moving towards literate nations. Hence, there is a need to develop further to ensure that there would be learning society all over the world. In order to create a learning society, all citizens need to be engaged in learning. Continuing Education Program, that is CEP, aptly relates to the European Union slogan which says, "It is never too late to learn." The core of Continuing Education Program is purposive, self-led and self-initiated learning. Continuing education is a need of all those who want to keep up with the changing knowledge domain. It is needed to learn new skills, improve them and hone them, which can add to one's income. Continuing education is a perpetual lifelong learning process. Objectives of the modules are as follows. At the end of the session, learners will be able to discuss definition of continuing education, enlist aim and objectives of continuing education program, recollect various terms used for continuing education, explain meaning and significance of continuing education, retrieve the history of continuing education program, name the providers of continuing education programs, infer the strategies of organization of continuing education program. Now we will see what is the aim of continuing education. The aim of continuing education is to create a sustainable learning environment so that learners can pursue their literacy aspirations and be a part of learning society. The term for continuing education used by different countries are different. We will see them one by one. In Netherlands, continuing education is called as in-service and continuous training. In USSR, it is called as further training. In USA, it is called as faculty retraining continuing education. In UK, continuing education is called as recurrent education, further education, staff development, self-instruction. And in Germany, continuing education is called as staff development. In Switzerland, it is said as instructional development. In France, education permanent. Adi Sheshai in 1981 said, while discussing about continuing education, that continuing education argued that assumption of some prior education that can be continued has nothing to do with formal education. The term continuing education is applicable to all who have been to school or not. He mentioned that basic literacy should be part of continuing education. UNESCO and Prerna too viewed literacy as an element of continuing education. Prerna and Caldwell both found that the basic purpose of continuing education is individuals learning for self-development and self-fulfillment. Now we will see definition of continuing education. Asia Pacific Program of Education for All, that is APEAL, was launched in 1987. The definition given by it still hold apt, which has defined continuing education as the provision of opportunities for lifelong learning. Under APEAL, the UNESCO Sub-Regional Seminar on Continuing Education held in Canberra, Australia in November 1987 defined continuing education as a broad concept which includes all of the learning opportunities all people want or need outside the basic literacy education and primary education. This definition implies the following, that is, continuing education for literate youth and adults. Continuing education is responsive to needs and wants. It can include experiences provided by the formal, non-formal and informal education, which includes its subsectors as well. It is defined in terms of opportunity to engage in lifelong learning after the conclusion of primary schooling or its equivalent. So, continuing education includes both formal and non-formal education. Now, we will see the meaning and significance of continuing education. UNESCO's Learning to Be report had a mention of a learning society, according to which a learning society is one in which all agencies of a society are the providers of education and not only those primary responsibility, that is of education or schooling. As needs arise, adults can draw on programs offered by formal education, non-formal education and informal education, as these subsectors are traditionally defined. Arne Carlson, Director, Institute of Lifelong Learning, said, "Sustainable literacy is the foundation of literacy." Now we will see the history of continuing education. Many philosophers of education have emphasized the importance of integrated continuous learning. Confucius, the Chinese philosopher, had said that he never refused anyone who wanted to learn. The people of Athens had a systematic lifelong learning consisting of training and participation of citizens in all aspects like theatre, music, games and context, libraries art exhibition, etc. In India also, people participated in religious activities, cultural festivals, dance, drama, music and painting, etc. Rabindranath Tagore, through the establishment of Shanti Niketan, integrated education with life and culture. For continuing education in England, village colleges of Henry Morris in Cambridgeshire opened in 1930. The land grant colleges of USA paved way to bring people, especially farmers, merchandise and working people to the university. In Canada too, continuing education had gained ground with the other Western countries. In 1972, UNESCO Institute of Education initiated a study on concept of lifelong education and its implication for school programs, curricula as well as promotion of research. In India, the continuing education movement was initially developed through various conferences sponsored by University Grants Commission across country during 1975-1976. In India, continuous learning was advocated by Dr. Mohan S. Mehta. Mehta said we should learn and receive new and true knowledge from everybody and everywhere. At the same time, we should not neglect or disregard our own treasure. Robbie Kitt's thesis of continuing learning or lifelong learning explains prepositions. National policy on education has documented that continuing education covering established as well as emerging technologies will be promoted. The National Literacy Mission designed the program of continuing education for Neo-literates, which came into force in 1996, and a scheme of continuing education centers was launched. The main objective of continuing education program was to institutionalize continuing education for Neo-literates and to ensure flexibility in design and implementation to address the needs of Neo-literates. More specific objectives include facilities for retention and reinforcement of literacy skills, application of functional literacy for equality of life improvement, dissemination of information to participate in development programs, creation of awareness about national issues, concerns, vocational skill training, library provisions, organization of recreational and cultural activities. The Jilla Saksharta Samiti was supposed to implement above continuing education programs. As per the Directorate of Adult Education Manual on Continuing Education, a wide range of programs would have to be organized for Neo-literates, including, for example, short-term courses, Charcha Mandal, that is discussion groups, information window, games and other recreational activities. A large number of activities in convergence with line departments and awareness and right-based agencies. Resource mobilization, supervision and monitoring and maintenance and records were also part of this continuing education programs. The evaluations of literacy programs revealed that activities such as public libraries, Charcha Mandals and other recreational activities satisfied certain information needs of the Neo-literates. Two basic premises of continuing education include: 1. The opportunity for learning should be equal for all who wish to learn. Learning is lifelong process unconfined to one's youth or classroom or campuses. The University Grants Commission Review Committee reported that continuing education activity should be always need-based. The Indian government itself has funded post-literacy and continuing education projects far back as 1982-1983, when it was thought that supporting such activity for limited hours over 2 or 3 years would suffice. Belém framework for action 6th International Conference on Adult Education held in Belém, Brazil in 2009 recommended that the fulfillment of a right to education for adults and young people is conditioned by considerations of policy, governance, financing, participation, inclusion, equality and quality are critical. Indian National Literacy Mission adopted 4 programs. 1. Individual interest promotion programs, quality of life improvement programs, equivalency programs, and the 4th one is income generating programs. Appeal training materials for continuing education personnel, that is ATLP continuing education by Asia Pacific Program of Education for All was launched in 1987 by UNESCO with the aim of promoting literacy and basic learning skills through 3 programs. That is, 1 is eradication of illiteracy, universalization of primary education and continuing education for development. In 1988, the scheme of post-literacy and continuing education was brought in operation by National Literacy Mission. Post-literacy and continuing education were 2 different phases to be carried out one after another, but the field experience revealed that the both post-literacy and continuing education activities were carried out simultaneously. The scheme of continuing education came into effect in 1995, where both post-literacy and continuing education were in unison. In 2007, when Sakshar Bharat scheme, we find that coexistence of literacy, basic education, equivalency, vocational education and continuing education is there. The continuing education program provides a learning continuum for the efforts of total literacy, post-literacy activities in the country. However, the content and form of the program was changed over the years. In 1988, when the scheme of post-literacy and continuing education was brought into effect, post-literacy and continuing education were treated as separate phases in which post-literacy was followed by continuing education. With experience, it was clear that both these activities have to be carried out simultaneously. There were a number of activities in the continuing education phase that would actually help neo-literates sustain their skills, remain interested in learning and participate in larger development efforts. As a result, in the scheme of continuing education that came into force in 1995, we see post-literacy and continuing education in unison. In India, it was observed by the academicians that during literacy campaign, literacy program generated lot of enthusiasm among people for literacy. The campaigns increased their demand for learning and many wished to realize their potential to further enhance their skills on their own terms and convenience. It was reported that total literacy campaign had a major weakness that from the beginning of the program, it did not plan for post-literacy and continuing education programs. Continuing education gives an opportunity to people to improve their literacy skills and improve their personal socio-economic status. The learners learn as per their need and interest. Many studies have mentioned that there is a need to organize continuing education program in the community to reach out to youth to impart learning related to skill development. The author, based on her field and research experience, has drawn following strategies which can be included while organizing continuing education programs at the grassroots level. Now, we will see how continuing education programs can be organized for neo-literates. We will see them in 3 phases, that is before organizing the continuing education programs, during the implementation of continuing education programs and after the implementation of continuing education programs. So, before initiating continuing education programs, identify the clients of post-literacy programs, continuing education program. There is a need to reach to the unreached, disadvantaged and marginalized section of the society in order to know the group who is in need to learn. The clients of continuing education program could be out of school groups, occupational groups, cottage industry workers, hostel workers, workers in hospitals, shopkeepers, hawkers, construction workers, elected women leaders of local self-government, self-help group members, groups of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, deserted women, widows, TB patients, people living with HIV AIDS, and youth, boys, girls residing in slums, physically challenged, visually challenged, professional groups including doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers, lawyers, and special interest groups like those interested in learning art and craft, computer, use of internet, etc. Then the second step would be finding out the learning needs of the selected groups. This can be done by having discussion with the local leaders, political leaders, NGOs, focus group discussions with the stakeholders, discussion with the individuals, groups, sample surveys, mailed questionnaire, reports of expert assessment, participatory rural appraisal, discussion with the NGOs having field base, making use of past experience to develop new programs. Advertisement and the newspapers, television, rapport with local people in initiating continuing education courses. Thorough knowledge of the community education programs based on research findings can also be used in knowing the needs of the people. The third strategy is creating demand for lifelong learning course or courses. This strategy needs to be used when the learners are not ready to learn something new or they do not know that they need to learn something different. Like Bharat Gyan Vigyan Samiti had done a lot in this field. Demand for learning can be created by various ways like contacting self-help group, local self-government, by networking through spreading awareness, convincing SHG members the need for the courses, giving details of the course, taking local people on educational tours and showing them successful projects. Thus, they create a need for the course among them. Need for learning comes from the stakeholders. Formal discussion with the stakeholders, that is Vacha, first observe the community, then frame a learning program. For example, even in Masum, use of internet and social media in knowing the needs of the people is done. Fourth step is attracting participants for continuing education programs. Depending on the nature, place and content of continuing education program, following strategies or strategies can be used to attract participants for continuing education programs, such as involving local people in planning continuing education programs and the projects. And after the needs assessment survey, if a meeting of local people is organized to gain their participation in continuing education program, it helps a lot, as then local people get sense of participation and belongingness. Offering the course in local language. Usually continuing education programs are organized in local languages. Everywhere this is seen. Residential education programs, if possible. Residential education programs can be organized, especially when the learners are geographically scattered and there is a possibility that they could be gathered at a central place for 3 to 5 days to complete the continuing education program. Further, such continuing education program can be organized for the inmates of hostel, protection home or of the organization. Appeal to the experts to join as teachers, instructors of continuing education program. it was often found that there is a dearth of expert teachers to teach continuing education programs, but some agencies of providers of continuing education program do maintain a list of resource persons along with their profile. For attracting good, educated and experienced teachers of the nearby areas, an appeal can be made to resource persons to awaken their social feelings by asking them to do something related to social development and change. Another strategy for continuing education includes doing publicity of these programs. Publicity of continuing education program can be done by various ways. There is word of mouth publicity, networking with various NGOs and agencies, giving advertisement in local newspapers, use handouts, internet, use of auto rickshaw loudspeakers, using past students or ex-participants of the courses as ambassadors of the NGO. Work of the agency, NGO attract people for their program. Collect funds to take care of the expenses incurred during running continuing education programs. For organizing continuing education program, if there is a dearth of funds, then it can be raised through donations. Offering free of cost courses, scholarship for educating participants of the course. There are some academic agencies who offer their programs free of cost. Some NGOs provide scholarship to the women participants who intend to do continuing education program. Employing local people for organizing continuing education programs. Many academic institutions, agencies follow the policy of appointing local people as resource persons of continuing education program, as this way stakeholders gain financial income. Further, in return get people having local knowledge and those who have feeling. NGOs like PATH, Manolok have a policy of employing local people. These NGOs put in lot of efforts to build up the capacities of these local people. They insist on employing local people not only for getting employed according to their suitability to the job, but also for higher level jobs. In PATH, each employee is a success story as everyone has grown by working with PATH. Pratham, Doorstep School, Navjivan, Lokvikas Sanstha also tries to employ local people. During the implementation of continuing education program, what needs to be done, that we'll see. First, one has to do pre and post test of participants. Pre-testing the knowledge of participants before the beginning of the program gives an idea how much needs to be done for the learners according to the level of their learning. Now, we will see the teaching methods which can be used in continuing education program. Lecture method, it is often used for teaching and learning. The forum, information followed by questions from the audience. Symposium, preparation, that is presentation of different points of view and approaches and angles to stimulate analysis of the subject under discussion. Discussion can be another teaching method wherein pooling of small group ideas, experience and knowledge can be used. Field trips, study tours to gain first-hand experience of a problem situation can also be used as one of the continuing education program teaching method. Puppetry, drama, role plays, simulation games and film show followed by discussion to generate interest among participants. Poster tasks, photographs, slideshows, tapes can also be used as teaching aids. Another thing in implementing continuing education program includes providing academic support for improving quality of teaching learning. Academic facilities, arrangements like an independent training center, building premises of their own with classroom, seminar hall, reception room and public hall with proper toilet and water facilities is also looked after while implementing continuing education program. Response to the learning needs of participant. Accept the learning concerns of the participant is required in continuing education program. offer the learners what they need to learn even in the midst of the course can also be done. Indian Institute of Youth Welfare organizes courses in the slum areas of Nagpur city as per the convenience of women participants. In some of the NGOs like Dr. V.T. Patil Foundation, computer classes were organized in the night, that is from 8 to 10:30 p.m. because this time was suitable for women who were agriculturalists in Kolhapur. Observing the growth of participants carefully and bring change in their lifestyle. Ensure that people for whom the continuing education program is organized would develop their personality while they attend the continuing education program. Ensuring completion of continuing education courses by the participants. Different methods like giving personal attention, paying home visits, and convincing parents and of the young adult learners. These were very important strategies that were used by Kerwadi Social Welfare Association, Yerala Development Society, Avani Project, Doorstep, Secret, and Dr. Reddy Foundation. Imparting value added training. Mahila Sarvangin Vikas Utkarsha Mandal, Masum, Pune gives extensive publicity to their continuing education programs like dress designing course. This is a full-time course. In addition to the set curriculum, Masum teaches yoga, health and HIV awareness to improve employability of the young girls and women. Production and distribution of teaching learning material while implementing continuing education program is done by Swayam Siddha and Pratham, and they distribute small booklets for children. A group of creative people was encouraged to come together for preparing these booklets for children. These booklets were distributed free of cost to the participants of the courses conducted by NGOs. Now we will see what is the thing which is included in post implementation of continuing education program. It includes feedback of the participants of educational programs, post-test evaluation of continuing education program, continuous evaluation, summative examination, and the objective of this evaluation is twofold, namely to provide a retrospective and a prospective analysis. The retrospective analysis takes the form of an interim evaluation of various qualitative and quantitative aspects of the implementation of continuing education program and the results achieved. The prospective analysis examines the strengths and weaknesses of continuing education as well as it provides recommendations on the continued implementation of the current program and the design of the successor program. If possible, the organizers of continuing education program can organize an exhibition of items prepared by participants of the continuing education program and give them an opportunity to do marketing of their products in a bazaar environment held on the premises. Swayam Siddha Kolhapur provides such an opportunity to its participants on every Wednesday. But for many providers of continuing education programs or NGOs, this is not feasible as they do not have the required infrastructure. So, while concluding this module, I would like to say that as the nations all over the world are moving towards literate nations, there is a need to ensure the literates will not relapse into illiteracy. Continuing education needs to be institutionalized to ensure that neo-literates are provided with learning opportunities to continue their learning throughout their life. For this purpose, there is a need to take help of technologies like mobile, televisions, community radios, etc. to reach out the unreached. Thank you.